Alright, so there's a couple things I want to go over in this video, one of which is a randomizer. The next one is a very basic command that's used very often. It's one of the first things you learn in programming. It's the print command, so I'll probably start with that, to be honest. And then we're going to go over conditional statements, which in essence are if-then statements, which if you don't understand that, is basically if something is true, then it does this. Otherwise, it just skips it. So what I'll do is just start with the print command. It's often taught, like I said, as one of the first things that you learn. It basically just prints out something that either you specifically set or using variables or any combination of the two. And it'll print actually in the script editor. So if it's the last line, it'll show up in this. I forget what this window's called actually now, but I think it's like a command line or something like that. But it'll show up right down here. Actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, right there. So the way you use it is very simple. If it's a print command, you would assume that the command is actually called print. Now, the way you work this afterward is, let's say maybe you have a variable name, so name or something like that, and that would actually just print whatever the value is for name down at the bottom. However, you can actually specify what you want it to say as well. So, and this is extremely common to learn, but the most common thing you first learn is how to print hello world in a programming class. So the way you use the print command, if you want to print words or any custom statement, it's almost treated like a string, so you want to put it in quotations. So hello world, and then semicolon, and that completes the line. And basically when I run this, it'll just show hello world. So I'll just select it and hit my enter key on the number pad, and there's your result. Simple as that. Nothing horribly fancy. It's a very simple command, but it can be used in much more fancier means, I guess. I don't really know a better way to put that. For instance, let's combine this. Let's say I make a variable such as name David. So we've got a variable called name, and it's going to be equal to my name. So what I can do is either just do print $name, and you can see the result is prints by name. Yay. Of course, it's the last line, and like I said, it will show up right down here. So I can do this. I'm going to combine this variable with something custom that I type in. So when you do this, when you combine variables with handwritten stuff, if you want to call it that, you're going to have to use parentheses. So let's say my name is, put another space and an end quote, and then I'm going to do plus $name, end parenthesis, semicolon. And what this will do is basically it's using the order of operations, which is back from old algebra. I think it was please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, and addition, subtraction. So it's going to look at this line and say, I want to print something, but then it's going to notice that there's parentheses. So it's going to calculate what's in those parentheses before going any further. Then it's going to run the print with that. So now if I run this, see it says, my name is David. So it's just combining the two together. It's a very simple command. I use this for error checking sometimes just to make sure that if a script is getting caught up somewhere, I kind of use, like, I'll print something just to see if it's even getting to that point or grabbing a certain value. It's very useful in the grand scheme of things. But more or less that's how you print. Now there is one addition to that. If you want to print over and over again, maybe you have it in a loop, for instance, what would happen is, let's say I put another print line. I'll just add the hello world. What's going to happen is it's not going to do a carriage return. It's just going to print it right on one line. So what you need to use is this one little additional thing at the end of the print. So I'll add plus, and this is just a custom quotation thing, but /n. And what this does is it's a hidden character. It's going to recognize the two of these together and say, oh, that's a new line. So now it uses that /n to say, hey, put that on a new line. But that's more or less almost everything you'll need to know about the print command. But of course, if you ever want to see if there's anything more, I don't really know, we can go to the mel command reference and see if there's anything else. And it's loading on a different window, so it's working. Alright, so if we want to see what's in the print command, we can just look up print, and there it is. And maybe there's some other stuff you can do with it, but I really don't think there's going to be all that much. Doesn't look like it. It looks pretty basic. Yeah, it is. So, not a whole lot, but we'll probably be using this a little later on for another command. So either way, that's the print command. Now, the other thing I want to show you is the randomizer, and this one's real easy to use. It's basically just RAND, and then you're going to give it a start value and an end value, and what it'll do is it'll pick a random value between those two numbers. That's pretty simple. So let's say we get like value between -10 and 10, and I can just run this, and you'll see I get different value every single time, never going above or below those values. So that's more or less how you get a random value. But the reason I'm showing you this is because I want you to see how to maybe use this in terms of moving something or placing something in a different spot. So let's say we create a polycube. So the command to create a polycube is polycube. Again, if you need to find this stuff, you can either actually use the tool and it'll show up in your script editor up here, or you can look it up in the mel command reference. But polycube. Now, after you create something, it automatically is selected. So let's say I want to move this randomly in X, Y, and Z. What I can do is either first I can use variables, and I'll show you that actually. Let's say float new X, and that will equal rand, let's say -20 to 20. Okay. Float new Y, ran, I don't know, -5 to +9, I don't know. Just creating random ranges. And float Z, oops, new Z equals rand, let's say negative, yeah, let's go with the -20 to maybe something like that. Who cares? It's all random anyway. So what I can do now is, again, the polycube is automatically selected once it's created on line 1. So what I can do is just move, which is the move command, and then I'll just pump in these values. It's going to go move X, Y, Z. That's the way you want to write it in there, but using the variables. So new X, new Y, new Z. And again, mel command reference is going to be one of your best friends. So if I need to see how to use the move command, there it is, and it'll kind of show you up here. So it says move. You can throw in any one of those flags if you need it, and then it's just going to ask for 3 values. Float, 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 X, Y, Z. And then it's going to generally ask you for an object. Now, if it's not selected, you can specify the object, so that's really useful. But you can also see some examples down here. Okay? But again, in our case, the polysphere has actually already been selected because it was just created. So we can just do move X, Y, Z, and it'll automatically move whatever's currently selected. So if I run this, there we go. And you can see that our cube has been moved. So if we look at the actual values, -17, -1.1, and +11, all of which match the different ranges that we were using. So that's perfect. It's actually working exactly how we want. But more or less, that's how you use the randomizer. There's not a whole lot more to it that you would really need. You could get even crazier with it if you really wanted to. You could like nest randoms within one another. So you could do like rand of between a random number between -100 and +100, and then another random number, sorry, -1000 and +1000. So this would just be more random, if that makes more sense. So this time I get -30. There's 312, 367. So you can see how we can really kind of make it more random. Technically, for all intents and purposes, a randomizer in a computer is not random 100%. It's hard to explain, but because a computer cannot actually make a random number due to its limitations. Um, it's as random as it can be. 99% random is pretty dang random. So that's how you use randomizer. This is also how, just so you can see how to use move. But just to add something here, let's say we made this polycube and we wanted to name it automatically. By default, it's obviously going to be named pcube something, but I could name it. This is just a flag for name. Let's say Bob. So we could call it Bob, and then when we're using move, if it's not selected, for instance, we could just literally say move Bob. So I'll delete that just so we can start fresh. And there you go. See, it moved Bob, and you can see it's named. So pretty easy to use, more or less. I mean, that's the basic function of a mel command. The basic way you use it. Almost anything that you're going to create can be done in a very simple manner like this, where the command is very straightforward. Polycube, that kind of thing. But that's how you use rand. So now I'll go ahead and use this cube because it'll help since it's got some values on it already. So what I'll do is use this for my conditional statement. The way a conditional statement is, if something is true, let's say if 1 is greater than 0, then, it automatically puts the curly braces in there now. But basically, if this is true, it's going to do whatever's in these curly braces. So I can just say, this is true. Oops. And of course it doesn't really care for this syntax right here, so I'm going to have to come up with something a little bit better. Let's say, for instance, you know what, it might actually work if I just put parentheses. Let me see. Hey, there it is. So it does work. I just needed to add parentheses in this case. So what I can do is, let's say I want to see if the let's say if the translate z value is above 0, let's say, I can print this is true. And you can do more than just print, obviously. That's just what I'm going for at this point. So what I got to do first is actually get the translate value, because I can't just punch it in there by default. And we're actually going to do this in another lesson as well, but I figure I might as well throw this in there now. There are a couple of attribute commands in Maya, otherwise known as attrs, A-T-T-R. Just the short way of writing attribute. But you'll find a couple of commands that actually can adjust your attributes, and we'll be going over them more so in another lesson. But in this case, I want to go over what's called getAttr. What it's going to do is get the attribute value for you. So, getAttr, then you got to tell it what you want to get. So let's say I get the translate z of Bob, because that's his name right now. So Bob dot tz, translate z, or you can write this translate z. So if I run that, it's actually going to give me the translate z value, and there it is. So I can use this by setting this equal to a variable. So let's say I make a float, get z equals, and now here's the one thing you got to do. Excuse me. Because this is actually running a command as opposed to me just saying it's 12, it's 13. It's actually trying to find it first. What I have to do is use what's called a backtick. Backtick is on the same button as the tilde on your keyboard. It's right next to the number 1 generally. So what you do is you just put that in. It's not an apostrophe. It goes in a different direction technically. So you put it at the beginning and at the end of that command, and what happens is it's order of operations again. It says, hey, I want to get a float, and it's going to be equal to something, but then, whoa, there's these backticks. So what it does is it just kind of runs this command and gets that value, and then looks at the line again and says float $getz equals whatever that number is. Backticks are really useful, especially in this case where you're setting a variable equal to something right away. So what I can do now is, let's say I want to say, is this less than 0? So, is $getz if $getz is less than 0, which we know it's not, but I want you to see what happens. So if I run it, it's showing us the program, but notice at the end, it's not actually printing anything. Why? Because it's not true. So, if if I change this now, there you go. So now it's true. Now, you've seen greater than, you've seen less than, there's also greater than or equal or less than or equal. The only thing you have to add is that. So that would be if get z is greater than or equal to 0, then it will actually do this. If-then statements are very, very simple. You can actually nest these together with like for loops, so you could run a for loop. If it's true, I want you to print 10 times this. And we've seen the for loops now, so I can show you that as well. For x equals 0, x is less than or equal to 10. Let's say it runs, 11 times, I guess, in this case. X plus plus. Open curly brace and close it. So now, if it is greater than 0, it's going to print this is true 10 times. So I'll clear the top real quick. And there it is. You can see it's printed it 10 times. So just showing you how you can combine stuff together. Okay? But more or less, that's how you do those three things. You got the print command, you got the randomizer, or the rand command, and you've also got if statements. But if statements are very simple. It's just a conditional type of thing, If it's true, do this. If it's not, keep going. If you got any questions, though, you can email me.